Why does the princess look sad, Daddy? The little girl asked. Then what the single dad did changed everything. Before we continue, please tell us where in the world are you tuning in from? We love seeing how far our stories travel. Ryan Mitchell sat at his usual corner table at the Corner Cup Cafe in downtown Austin on a Saturday morning in mid-September, with his 8-year-old daughter Emma coloring her way through her third princess coloring book of the month. And this was their tradition. Every Saturday at 10 a.m., they'd come here for hot chocolate and donuts and 2 hours of just being together before the rest of the weekend got busy with laundry and groceries and all the stuff that came with being a single dad. Ryan was pretending to check work emails on his phone, but really he was just watching Emma color Belle's dress yellow and thinking about how his daughter looked more like her mom every single day. And it had been 4 years since his wife Amy died, but some mornings the missing her still hit him like a punch to the chest. The bell above the cafe door chimed, and a woman walked in who made Emma's head snap up from her coloring book so fast Ryan thought she might get whiplash. And Emma grabbed his arm and whispered with the kind of awe usually reserved for actual royalty, "Daddy, look, a real princess just walked in." Ryan looked up, expecting to see maybe someone in a costume or something, but what he saw was just a woman in a beautiful floral sundress with her dark hair pulled back and heels that clicked on the tile floor. And she looked put together and professional, and yeah, okay, she was really pretty, but definitely not an actual princess. He said, "That's just a nice lady sweetheart, not a princess." But Emma shook her head with absolute certainty and said, "No, Daddy, she looks exactly like Belle from my movie. She even has the same hair and everything. She's definitely a princess." The woman ordered her coffee at the counter, and Ryan watched her sit down at a table in the opposite corner. And that's when he noticed that this supposed princess was crying. Not loud, dramatic crying, but the quiet kind where you're trying really hard to hold it together in public and failing. And she kept wiping her eyes and looking at her phone and then crying harder. Emma noticed too because his daughter noticed everything. And she tugged on Ryan's sleeve and said in that concerned voice she got, "Daddy, why does the princess look sad? Princesses are supposed to smile and be happy like in the movies." Ryan said, "Sometimes people just have bad days, honey. It's okay to be sad sometimes." And Emma looked at him with those big eyes that were exactly like her mother's and said, "But you always tell me that when someone's sad, we should try to help them. That's what Mommy would want us to do. Remember?" Ryan did remember because he'd been saying that exact thing since Emma was 4 years old and asking why Mommy wasn't coming home from the hospital. And now his own words were coming back to bite him because his 8-year-old daughter was absolutely right. Before Ryan could figure out what to say, the woman dropped her phone and it clattered across the floor and slid right under Ryan's table. And he picked it up and couldn't help seeing the lock screen, which was a photo of her in a wedding dress standing next to a man with the words Derek and Claire and a date from 3 months ago. He walked over to her table and said, "You dropped this," and held out the phone. And the woman looked up with mascara streaked down her face and said, "Oh my God, thank you. I'm so sorry. I'm a complete mess right now. You probably think I'm crazy sitting here crying in public." Before Ryan could respond, Emma appeared right next to him, because apparently his daughter had decided this was happening whether he was ready or not. And Emma said with zero filter, "Are you okay, princess? You look really sad. Did something bad happen?" The woman looked surprised, and then she actually laughed a little bit through her tears and said, "Princess? That's very sweet. I'm Claire. And yeah, something kind of bad happened. But it was a while ago. I'm just having a hard morning." Emma said with the brutal honesty that only 8-year-olds can pull off, "You look like Belle from Beauty and the Beast. That's why you're a princess. But Belle smiles a lot and you're crying. Did your prince turn into a beast or something?" Ryan wanted to disappear into the floor, but Claire laughed for real this time and said, "You know what? That's actually pretty accurate. My prince turned out to not be much of a prince at all." Ryan said, "I'm Ryan. This is Emma. I'm really sorry. She's extremely direct, and apparently we're bothering you during your Saturday morning breakdown." But Claire shook her head and said, "No, please don't apologize. Adults spend so much energy pretending not to notice when someone's falling apart. It's actually really refreshing to have someone just ask." She looked at Emma and said, "Do you guys want to sit down for a minute? I could probably use the company, honestly." And Emma was already climbing into the chair across from Claire before Ryan could say yes or no. They sat there for the next hour and a half, which was way longer than Ryan had planned, and Claire told them the age-appropriate version of her story, which was that she was supposed to get married 3 months ago, but the man had changed his mind at the last possible second. Emma was absolutely outraged and said, "He left you at the wedding? That's so mean. You're really pretty and nice. He must be really dumb." And Claire laughed and said, "Thank you, sweetheart. I moved here to Austin from Dallas a few weeks ago to start over, and this morning I was looking at old photos and feeling sorry for myself. So I came here to at least be sad in public instead of alone in my apartment." Ryan said, "Austin's a good city for fresh starts. I've lived here my whole life." And Claire said, "What do you do?" And Ryan said, "I'm a construction site supervisor for Oak Ridge Construction. We do commercial buildings mostly." And Claire's entire face changed. She said, "Wait, Ryan Mitchell? You're Ryan Mitchell from Oak Ridge?" And Ryan said, "Yeah, how did you know that?" And Claire put her hand over her mouth and started laughing and said, "I'm your new occupational health nurse. I start on Monday. I'm supposed to do safety checks and handle on-site injuries. We're literally going to be working together." They both just sat there staring at each other while Emma said, "This is like when the princess meets the prince in the village before the ball, and they don't know they're going to see each other again." And honestly, Emma wasn't wrong. Ryan said, "Wow, okay. Small world. I guess I'll see you Monday then." And Claire said, "I guess you will. This is either going to be really convenient or really awkward." And Ryan said, "Let's go with convenient. And hey, if you need anything while you're settling into Austin, restaurant recommendations or directions or whatever, I can give you my number, for work stuff." Claire smiled, and it was the first real smile Ryan had seen from her all morning, and she said, "I'd actually really like that. I don't know anyone here yet, and it's been kind of lonely." And Emma, who had apparently appointed herself as the director of this entire interaction, said, "You should come to the park with us tomorrow. We go every Sunday and feed the ducks. You can meet our friends, and Daddy knows where all the good swings are." Ryan said, "Emma, don't pressure people into hanging out with us." But Claire was already nodding and said, "Actually, that sounds really nice. If you don't mind me crashing your Sunday tradition." Ryan said, "We definitely don't mind. Bring coffee and we'll bring the good snacks. Emma's very particular about what qualifies as duck-feeding appropriate bread." They exchanged numbers, and Claire left about 20 minutes later, and the second she was out the door, Emma turned to Ryan with the biggest smile on her face and said, "Daddy, you really like the princess. I can tell. You were smiling at her the same way the princes smile at the princesses in my movies." Ryan felt his face get hot and said, "She's nice and we're being friendly because she's new in town and she's going to work with me. That's all." Emma gave him this look that was way too knowing for an 8-year-old and said, "You're going to marry her someday, I just know it." And Ryan laughed and said, "Slow down, kiddo. We literally just met her." But he couldn't stop thinking about Claire's smile and the way she'd laughed at Emma's princess comment and how she'd opened up to complete strangers in a coffee shop because his daughter had asked if she was okay. Monday morning came faster than Ryan expected, and he showed up at the construction site at 7 a.m. like always. And at 7:30, a car pulled up, and Claire got out wearing scrubs and work boots and her hair in a ponytail. And she looked completely different from the crying woman in the sundress, but somehow just as beautiful. She walked over to where Ryan was reviewing blueprints and said, "So do I call you Ryan or Mr. Mitchell in front of your crew?" And Ryan said, "Ryan's fine. We're pretty casual here. Welcome to Oak Ridge." And they shook hands, but held on just a little bit longer than professional. And Ryan's best friend Tom walked by and did a double take and said, "Who's the new nurse? And why are you two looking at each other like that?" Ryan said, "This is Claire. She's our new occupational health nurse, and we're not looking at each other like anything." But Tom just grinned and walked away whistling. The whole day, Ryan and Claire kept accidentally running into each other. She'd be doing safety checks in one area, and he'd need to inspect the same area. Or she'd be setting up her medical station, and he'd need to grab tools from the same storage container, and every single time their eyes would meet, and they'd smile and look away like teenagers. By the end of the day, Tom pulled Ryan aside and said, "So you gonna ask her out, or just keep doing this awkward dance where you both pretend you're not into each other?" And Ryan said, She just got out of a serious relationship. She got left at the altar 3 months ago. The last thing she needs is me making things weird at her new job. Tom said, or maybe the last thing she needs is to be alone in a new city with nobody to talk to. Just think about it. And he walked away, leaving Ryan standing there thinking about Claire's smile and Emma calling her a princess and the fact that for the first time in 4 years, he actually wanted to take a chance on someone new. Sunday morning, Ryan and Emma showed up at Zilker Park with a blanket and a bag of snacks, fully expecting Claire to bail, because who actually follows through on spontaneous weekend plans with people they just met? But at exactly 11 o'clock, Claire pulled into the parking lot carrying 2 iced coffees and looking nervous in jeans and a t-shirt that made her look younger and more relaxed than the crying woman from the cafe or the professional nurse from the worksite. Emma spotted her and took off, running, yelling, "The princess came, Daddy, she actually came." And Claire laughed and caught Emma in a hug and said, "Of course I came. I promised, didn't I? And princesses always keep their promises." They spent 3 hours at that park, and Ryan couldn't remember the last time he'd had this much fun just existing. They fed the ducks with bread that Emma had researched extensively to make sure it was healthy for them. They pushed Emma on the swings until she was laughing so hard she couldn't breathe. And Claire told them about growing up in Dallas with 2 older brothers who used to put frogs in her backpack and how she had always wanted to be a nurse because her grandmother had been one. Ryan told her about Amy dying 4 years ago from complications after childbirth and how Emma had saved his life by giving him a reason to get up every single morning. And Claire's eyes got wet and she said, "She's incredible. You've done an amazing job with her." The Sunday park hangouts became their routine through September and October, and at work, Ryan and Claire were completely professional. She did her safety checks and handled minor injuries and kept the crew healthy. But there was this energy between them that everyone on site could feel. Tom kept making comments like, "You two need to just go on a real date already. This tension is killing all of us." And Ryan would say, "We're friends. She's recovering from a bad breakup. I'm not going to push." But the truth was, he was falling for Claire, and he was pretty sure she was falling for him too, based on the way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't paying attention. Late October, the company threw their annual family barbecue, and Emma begged Ryan to invite Claire. So he did, and she showed up in a sundress that made Ryan forget how to form sentences for a solid 30 seconds. Emma was glued to Claire's side the entire time, showing her off to everyone like she'd discovered buried treasure. And all the other workers' wives assumed Claire was Ryan's girlfriend, and neither of them corrected anyone. Because honestly, it felt kind of nice to just pretend for an afternoon. When they were walking to their cars after the barbecue, Ryan said, "Sorry, everyone assumed we were together. That must have been awkward." And Claire stopped walking and said, "I didn't mind actually, it felt really natural." Ryan took a breath and said, "Would you want to get dinner sometime? Like actual dinner, just the two of us. Like a date?" And Claire looked nervous and said, "Like a real date, not just friends hanging out?" And Ryan said, "Yeah, a real date, but only if you're ready, absolutely no pressure. We can keep doing exactly what we're doing if that's better." Claire said, "I'd really like that, but can we go slow? My last relationship kind of destroyed my ability to trust my own judgment." And Ryan said, "Slow is perfect. I've got an 8-year-old daughter and a dead wife. I'm not exactly rushing into anything either." Their first date was at a small Italian place that had been in Austin forever, and they talked for 4 straight hours about everything from their favorite terrible movies to what they wanted their lives to look like in 5 years. And when Ryan walked Claire to her car, he kissed her goodnight, and it was sweet and tentative and absolutely perfect. Emma asked the next morning, "Is Claire your girlfriend now? Can I call her that?" And Ryan said, "Would that be okay with you if she was?" And Emma said, "Yes, she's so nice. And she makes you laugh the way you used to laugh in the videos with Mommy. I think Mommy would really like her." Ryan had to turn away because his 8-year-old daughter had just given him permission to move on, and it hit him harder than he expected. And he said, "You're really wise, you know that, kiddo." And Emma said, "I know, you tell me all the time. So can she come over for Thanksgiving?" They spent Thanksgiving together, and it felt like family in the best possible way. Claire helping in the kitchen while Emma showed her every single craft project she'd made in the past month. And when they all sat down to eat, Ryan looked around his table and felt happy in a way he hadn't felt in 4 years. Everything was going perfectly until the second week of December, when Claire came to work looking like she hadn't slept in days. And she was distracted during her safety rounds and kept checking her phone with this stressed expression. Ryan pulled her aside during lunch and said, "What's wrong? You've been off all day." And Claire said, "My ex-fiancé Derek showed up at my apartment last night. He drove all the way from Dallas. He wants me back." Ryan felt his stomach drop and said, "What did you tell him?" And Claire said, "I told him he was 4 months too late, but he's staying in Austin until Christmas. He wants me to think about it." Ryan said, "Do you want to think about it?" And Claire looked at him with tears in her eyes and said, "I don't know. He humiliated me. He left me at the altar in front of 200 people, but we were together for 5 years, and part of me wonders if I gave up too easily." Ryan wanted to say that she didn't give up. Derek did. But instead he said, "Take whatever time you need. I'm not going anywhere." Even though it was killing him to say it. Claire pulled back over the next week. She stopped coming to Sunday Park days, and she was distant at work. And Emma noticed immediately and said, "Why isn't Claire coming over anymore? Did I do something wrong?" Ryan said, "No, baby, you didn't do anything. Claire's just dealing with some complicated stuff right now, grown-up stuff." And Emma said, "Is she scared? Like when I was scared of the dark and didn't want to sleep alone?" Ryan said, "Yeah, I think she's scared." And Emma said with that 8-year-old wisdom that always surprised him, "When I was scared, you didn't leave me alone. You stayed with me until I wasn't scared anymore. Maybe Claire needs someone to stay too." Ryan realized his daughter was absolutely right, and he drove to Claire's apartment that night and knocked until she answered. She opened the door and said, "Ryan, what are you doing here?" And Ryan said, "Derek came back, didn't he? And now you're spiraling because the last person you trusted left you at the altar, and you're terrified I'm going to do the same thing." Claire started crying and said, "How did you know?" And Ryan said, "Because I know you, and I know what it's like to be scared of letting someone in when you've lost someone before. I lost Amy, and for 4 years I couldn't even imagine loving anyone else, because what if I lost them too?" He took her hands and said, "I can't promise you that I'll never leave because life happens and things are unpredictable, but I can promise you that I will fight. I will show up. I will choose you every single day that I'm able to choose. And Claire, I am so tired of being scared of what might go wrong that I miss out on what could go right." Claire kissed him hard and said, "I choose you. I choose this. I'm done letting Derek have any power over my future." And Ryan said, "So what are you going to tell him?" And Claire said, "I'm going to tell him that I found someone who showed up when it mattered, and I'm not stupid enough to let that go." Claire met Derek the next day at a coffee shop and told him, "I'm with someone who saw me at my lowest and didn't run away, someone who has a daughter who calls me princess and makes me feel like maybe I can have the family I always wanted. I'm not coming back to Dallas, and I'm not coming back to you." Derek tried to argue, but Claire stood her ground and said, "You took my choice away once when you left me at that altar. You don't get to do it again. Goodbye, Derek." And she walked out feeling lighter than she had in months. Christmas Eve, Ryan invited Claire to his family dinner, and his sister Sophie pulled him into the kitchen and said, "You're going to propose, aren't you? I can see it all over your face." And Ryan said, "Is it too soon? We've only been officially dating for like 2 months." And Sophie said, "When you know, you know. Does Emma know?" Ryan said, "She's been asking when Claire becomes her real mom for like 3 weeks now." And Sophie laughed and said, "Then what are you waiting for? Life's too short to wait for perfect timing." Ryan planned the proposal for New Year's Eve because it felt like the perfect way to start a new year and a new chapter. And he told Emma everything because there was no way he was doing this without his daughter being part of it, since she was the one who'd started the whole thing by calling Claire a princess 4 months ago. Emma was so excited she could barely keep the secret. She kept giggling at random times, and Ryan had to keep reminding her, "You can't tell Claire. It has to be a surprise. You have to wait until the actual day." And Emma would nod seriously, and then 5 minutes later, she'd be giggling again. New Year's Eve morning. Ryan told Claire he wanted to take her somewhere special, and when they pulled up to the Corner Cup Cafe, Claire looked at him confused and said, "We're going to our regular coffee shop. This is your big New Year's plan?" Ryan said, "Just trust me, okay? This place is important." And they walked in with Emma practically vibrating with excitement. The cafe manager saw them and smiled because Ryan had called ahead and arranged everything. And they sat down at the exact same table where Ryan and Emma had been sitting that September morning when Claire had walked in crying. Ryan took Claire's hands across the table and said, "4 months ago, you walked through that door, and my daughter called you a sad princess. And I had no idea that in that moment, my entire life was about to change." And Claire's eyes were already getting wet because she could tell something big was happening. He said, "You came to Austin heartbroken and alone, and you sat in this cafe looking at photos of a wedding that never happened, and Emma saw you and said we should help you. And sweetheart, helping you has been the best thing I've ever done, besides being Emma's dad." Ryan got down on one knee right there in the middle of the cafe and said, "You showed me that my heart could grow, that loving you doesn't mean forgetting Amy. It means honoring her by choosing to keep living and keep opening myself up to happiness." And before he could pull out the ring, Emma jumped up, holding a poster board sign she'd been hiding under the table. The sign was covered in glitter and stickers, and Emma's careful handwriting that said, "Will you be my mom?" And Claire put both hands over her mouth and started crying happy tears, while Emma stood there grinning so hard her face looked like it might split in half. Ryan pulled out the ring and said, "Claire Donovan, will you marry me? Will you marry us? Will you be Emma's mom and my wife and part of this family we've been building?" Claire was nodding before he even finished the question, and she said, "Yes. Oh my God, yes, both of you. I love you both so much." And the entire cafe erupted in applause because apparently everyone there had been in on the plan. Emma launched herself at Claire and said, "You're going to be my real mom now, like forever and ever." And Claire hugged her tight and said, "Forever and ever, sweetheart, I promise." They got married that following May in a beautiful outdoor garden venue with about 75 people. And Emma took her role as flower girl so seriously that she practiced her walk down the aisle about 300 times in the week leading up to the wedding. The ceremony was small and intimate, with white flowers everywhere and string lights hanging from the trees. And Claire walked down the aisle past a small table that had a framed photo of Amy on it, because Ryan had insisted that Emma's mom be honored on this day, since she'd given him the greatest gift of his life. Ryan was waiting at the altar, trying not to cry, and failing miserably. And when Claire reached him, she whispered, "I can't believe this is real. 4 months ago, I was sitting in a cafe crying over a man who didn't want me." And Ryan whispered back, "And now you're standing here with a man who can't imagine his life without you. Funny how things work out." Emma stood right next to Ryan instead of off to the side with the bridesmaids. And when the officiant asked if anyone had anything to say before the vows, Emma raised her hand and said, "I just want everyone to know that I'm the one who found Claire first. I called her a princess, and I was right." Everyone laughed, and Claire knelt down and hugged Emma and said, "You were absolutely right, sweetheart, and I'm the luckiest person in the world that you noticed me that day." Ryan's vows made every single person cry when he said, "You walked into my life when I thought my heart was permanently closed. Emma called you a princess, and you've been ours ever since. I promise to choose you every single day, even on the hard days. Even when life gets messy, I will always choose you." Claire's vows were, "You showed me that endings can turn into beginnings, that heartbreak can lead to the greatest love of your life, that family is built by the people who show up and stay. I choose you and Emma in this beautiful life we're creating together." Emma did a reading that she'd written herself about how families are made of love, not just blood, and there wasn't a dry eye anywhere when she finished. The reception was filled with dancing and laughter and joy, and their first dance was all three of them together with Emma, standing on Ryan's feet while Claire held them both. And Ryan thought about how 4 months ago he'd been a widower just trying to survive, and now he was a husband again, with a daughter who had two mothers who loved her. 1 year after the wedding, Claire officially adopted Emma, and they changed her last name to Mitchell Donovan. And Emma cried happy tears when the judge made it official and said, "Now I have two moms, one in heaven and one here with me, and I'm the luckiest girl ever." They found out a month later that Claire was pregnant, and Emma was absolutely over the moon excited about becoming a big sister. She immediately started planning everything from nursery colors to what bedtime stories she'd read to the baby. Their second wedding anniversary came around, and they went back to the Corner Cup Cafe because it had become their tradition to have anniversary breakfast at the place where everything started, and they brought Emma, who was now 10 years old, and their 2-year-old son, Henry, who was a tornado of energy in a tiny body. They were sitting at their usual table when a woman walked in alone and sat down in the corner. And she looked sad in that same quiet way Claire had looked sad 2 years ago, checking her phone and wiping her eyes and trying to hold it together in public. Emma noticed immediately and said, "Dad, that lady looks really sad." And Claire said, "Should we say something?" And Emma, who was 10 now and so much more confident than she'd been at 8, said, "Can I go talk to her? I think I should talk to her." Ryan looked at Claire and they both nodded, and Emma walked over to the woman's table and said, "Excuse me, are you okay? Sometimes talking to someone helps when you're sad." The woman looked up surprised and said, "That's very sweet of you. I'm just having a rough morning." And Emma said, "My mom was sitting in this exact cafe being sad 2 years ago. And then she met my dad and now we're a family and she's happy. So things can get better even when they seem really bad." The woman's eyes filled with tears, but she was smiling when she said, "Thank you. I really needed to hear that today." And Emma said, "You're welcome. I hope you find your happy ending too." And she walked back to her family looking proud of herself. Claire was crying happy tears and said, "She's absolutely incredible. When did she get so wise?" And Ryan said, "She learned from the best. She learned from both her moms." And he meant it because Emma had Amy's kindness and Claire's compassion, and somehow she'd become this amazing human who saw sad people and wanted to help them. 2 years later, their family had grown to 4 kids with Emma now 12 and helping with her 3 younger siblings. And every single Saturday morning, they still went to the Corner Cup Cafe because that's where their story had started, and they never wanted to forget it. Sometimes a little girl asks a simple question and changes the trajectory of 3 lives. Emma saw a sad woman in a cafe and said, "Daddy, why does the princess look sad?" And instead of ignoring it or saying it wasn't their business, Ryan taught his daughter that compassion matters and showing up for people matters. Claire was heartbroken and humiliated and alone in a new city, and one act of kindness from a widower and his 8-year-old daughter changed everything. She learned to trust again and love again and believe that happy endings were possible. Ryan learned that his heart was big enough to love Amy's memory and Claire's present, that moving forward didn't mean forgetting, it meant honoring the past by choosing to keep living fully. Emma learned that noticing people's pain and asking if they're okay can literally change lives, and she carried that lesson with her as she grew up and became the kind of person who always stopped to help the sad stranger. You don't need grand gestures or perfect timing. You just need to notice when someone's hurting and be brave enough to ask if they're okay. You need to show up even when it's awkward. You need to teach your kids that compassion is more important than minding your own business. Claire walked into a coffee shop crying over a man who'd left her at the altar. And she walked out with a future she never could have imagined, all because a little girl called her a princess and a single dad decided to find out why she was sad. Hit that subscribe button if this reminded you that love shows up in the most unexpected places, that coffee shops can be the beginning of everything, that the saddest person in the room might become your greatest blessing. Share this with someone who needs to know that heartbreak isn't the end of their story, it's just the painful middle before the beautiful ending. Thanks so much for being here with us today, and remember that sometimes the princess sitting alone in the cafe just needs someone to notice she's hurting and care enough to stay.